then we cannot do much about it. Heaven will not be able to do much about it. On the other hand, if human beings, level of consciousness is raised, human beings suddenly realize the incredible situation we're in, and then we try to change it. This, of course, contributes to the change of the course of human self-destructiveness. And of course, another thing we don't want to be too naive. The various institutions that are established by human beings, each one of them has certain kind of inertia. And sometimes you cannot do much of it. Inertia, which is related in the human sense, is the bad habits. The more you accumulate the bad habits, the less possible for you to transform yourself. Especially for young people, the possibility of self-transformation is great. But as you grow old, you become obsessed with things. Once you become obsessed with things, it's difficult to change it. It doesn't mean there's no potential for you to do it. But in actuality, you're not able to do it. Now, in addition to the unity of knowledge and action, Wang also advocated, following some of his predecessors, the preservation of the heavenly principle. Heavenly principle is the ultimate justification for human nature. Of course, from the Mansion point of view, human nature is good. In a sense, they are basic values inherent in human nature, such as feeling of empathy, feeling of sympathy, feeling of rightness, feeling of sensing the world, and feeling of knowing. I would simply say knowing and willing. These are basically human qualities. You cannot imagine any human being who cannot will and who cannot feel. Knowledge means your ability to understand these two qualities, and that understanding is also internal. You understand that you are able to will, you are able to feel. And the principle of Li, with the difficult idea of what we sometimes call civility, is to also understand for the feeling and the willing to become translated in concrete human action. It has to be able to differentiate itself. Parents are different from children in terms of age, authority. There's also a question of gender. All these differentiations are part of the human world. These differentiations are absolutely critical for the development of human culture. If there's no differentiation, there's no human culture possible. So the heavenly principle is contrasted with human desires. Now, from the Mansion point of view, human desires in themselves are not necessarily bad. Even in Xunzi, they're not necessarily bad. From the Xunzi point of view, if they become excessive, then social solidarity will not be maintained. If social solidarity will not maintain, the human survivability will be in question. So Xunzi would say, look, it is very important for human beings to be able to understand that the desires ought to be checked. And these desires are natural, but the way of checking them are basically external. You learn from the sages, every human being has the same nature, but each nature can actually become destructive for human, each desire. Yangming, then in the sense, the preservation of the principle is dependent on your elimination of human desires. Human desires are not the basic human feeling, such as commiseration, or the basic human ability to engage in rightness. You have a question?
Yeah, the way you talk about it, I'm trying to, it seems to me that Mengzi and Xunzi aren't actually necessarily totally in conflict, but they are somehow reconciled.
Not at all. You're absolutely right. Because, first of all, both of them believe strongly the perfectibility of human nature through self-effort. Therefore, the first chapter in Xunzi is learning. Learning civilization is critical for the Confucian tradition. Not only learning, but also self-cultivation, and also how you organize societies, how you organize government, how you organize family, how you organize even military affairs, and how you develop the sense of those people who are cultivated, and to help those people who have not yet cultivated. So cultivation itself is not simply a personal accomplishment. It involves obligation for society. So the idea is not only the people who are more powerful, more influential, should feel more obligated. People who are more cultivated, more successful in terms of their spiritual growth, also feels obligated to help others. So this Confucian position, if you put it in the Buddhist context, it's Mahayana. It's not Theravada. The Theravada tradition is you cannot help anyone. The only way you can help is yourself. Whereas the Mahayana tradition is someone who's able to help themselves to the highest stand of leaving the world to become part of nirvana. But there's one care that they cannot overcome. The care is for the survivability, or for the survival not only of all human beings, but all animals and all things. So they make the vow, if there's one person who doesn't enter into the nirvana, I'm not going into it. In other words, I don't want to reach the highest level of my perfection if there are other people who have not yet perfected. So this is related to the great Buddhist idea of compassion. Compassion is very much related to the Confucian idea of empathy and sympathy. Now let me introduce another concept. You have to go.
Yes.
And another concept is the idea of innate morality, or innate knowing. There's something so internal to you that you're able to know, you're able to feel internally. Of course, this is Mencius's position. But Wang-Yangming's position is that you extend it. So all four dimensions I talk about in terms of self-cultivation, in terms of fruitful interaction between the person and community, including the human species relationship, sustainability with nature, and even human and heaven form a community. Each one of them is linked to this human ability to extend their inner morality or inner awareness. How? Now, in the classical Mencius idea that learning to be human begins with loving and caring of those who are closest to oneself. Parents, for example. Parents' love for their children is totally natural. Children will have to learn to become filial. In fact, it's extremely difficult. In some societies, that is not emphasized. So human beings become independent, like other forms of animal kingdom. And when they grow up, they become independent. They still have some attachment. Gradually, when they get married, when they have children of their own, they feel more obligated, but in actuality, their attachment also becomes tenuous. But from the Mencius point of view, or from the Confucian point of view as a whole, that sense of attachment, the sense of care and concern ought to be cultivated. So the idea is from these very close natural feelings, attachment to one's parents, you extend that. If you don't extend, it will be suffocating. So we have to go beyond egoism and nepotism and parochialism and so on. You should also go beyond anthropocentrism, meaning human beings are not anthropological beings. Normally, the anthropologists study human beings, to be sure, but in the Confucian point of view, to be fully human, you have to go beyond